Hey, welcome to another episode of Principals on the Come Up, where we transform schools into hallelujah success stories. Today, we're going to be talking about our 7 most powerful principles to produce a high quality school. They're the 7 most powerful pillars to produce a high quality school. So for those of you who are with us here at the beginning, I want to know how many of you have already developed your discipline plan? How many of you have developed your discipline plan? And have you ever thought you could reduce your discipline issues and your suspensions and even your corporal punishment? Because I know some of you out there are still having corporal punishment on your campus because, in some states, especially in the state of Texas, if you get a parent to sign off on corporal punishment, then all right, just go on with it. But if you're responsible for the students in your campus, as far as discipline is concerned, then you're in the right place. And if you need help with student discipline, you're in the right place. So before we get started, let's see who is with us today. If you are a principal, an assistant principal, in that chat, I want you to put me. If you are a counselor, if you are a teacher, if you are an instructional coach, I want you to put me too. Me too. If you are a parent and you are one of the ones who signed up to find out what is actually going on in the schools, just put parent. Just let me know, or just a friend. Because today, the topic that we're talking about, student discipline, that is one of the hottest topics. Every year when we have our association meeting, especially our association in Texas, the Texas Association of Secondary School Principals, and also for the elementary school principals. I mean, we have an attorney who spends at least a day just going over discipline issues because it's such a hot topic, because parents take their issues to an attorney and the attorney takes it to the state, and we are given different types of direction on how we ought to handle discipline. It is just that big of an issue. So what I want you to do before we get started, I also want you to share this with one of your colleagues. Now, I know that you have some colleagues who say, I have this discipline under control. I know how to roll with this. They know how to roll with me. I carry a big stick and they need to jump as high as I tell them to, and that will take care of my discipline. Well, maybe that works in some places. But for the majority of students, that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work anymore. But let me tell you something about me. My name is Barbara Polk. I'm known as a turnaround principal. I was assigned by the state of Texas to go into low-performing schools, those schools that had been designated by the state of Texas as low-performing, to go in and to help those principals and to help those teachers. I was also accepted into the Harvard Graduate School of Education, their urban school institute, where we, as a group of administrators, principals, assistant principals from not only the United States but throughout the world, this is a common issue. This is a common challenge that we have, and that is the discipline. So today, what we're going to be looking at is that principals, it's going to take courage for you to transform your school. So if you are in a school or a school district that is in need of improvement, if you are in an urban school, if you are in a rural school, it's going to take, and this is your first year or you're a returning principal, it's going to take courage to transform that school. And one of the biggest forms of courage that it's going to take is going to have to deal with discipline, with student discipline. I don't care where you are. I don't care what type of school you're in. You are going to find that student discipline is a hot topic. So what we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at how do you eliminate zero tolerance? How do you eliminate zero tolerance? Now, how do you eliminate ISS as you know it? That's right. You say eliminate ISS. Oh man, I gotta have some control around here. I can't eliminate ISS. Oh my goodness. That is a full-time position on my campus to deal with those kids who just don't know how to act in the classroom. And how can you change your discipline behaviors? If you want to have a high quality school, then that discipline is something that you are just going to have to know how to deal with. And when you make some changes, when you make those changes, you're going to have some courage to make those changes. Good evening. We're not showing up as to who the user is, but good evening. Glad to have you. We're talking about discipline. We're talking about discipline today. So share this with your colleagues. Share this with your colleagues, because some of you have friends who need to hear this. Some of you have associates who need to hear this. And let me tell you about my story. I was assigned to one of the lowest performing schools in the state of Texas. I was assigned to the lowest performing school in my district. That's right, the lowest performing school in my district. I had students who brought drugs to school, who brought guns to school, who were a part of gangs. Our attendance rate was, just in the dumps. Parents had the option to not even let their students come to our school. They could sign off and say, I don't want to go there. I want to go someplace else. That's just what it was. So did I have to deal with discipline? You're absolutely right. Did I know how? I had no idea. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I know and I knew that it needed to be done. First of all, because of safety. I know that I had to be responsible for making sure that students who did come to my school, they came to a safe school. So how was I going to deal with discipline? And I didn't even know how to do it. So what I found out is that there was something that I learned about that was called restorative practices. And the way those restorative practices issues came up, nobody wanted to hear about that. Nobody wanted to hear about restorative practices. Teachers wanted those students who were disruptive in their classes, they wanted them out so they could teach. If you can't sit here and you can't follow directions, if you don't pay attention to what I'm talking about, you are going to be referred out. And then when they went to the assistant principal's office, and we had several assistant principals, those teachers did not want those students sent back during that same class period. Oh no, I just broke them out of here. And you're going to send them back? So what is that going to make me look like? It's going to make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. That's going to make me look like I'm the fool and they won and they're back. And they're going to say, and nothing happened to me. You wrote me out and I'm back already. Y'all have heard that. You've had that experience. You know what I'm talking about. So the teachers said, I want them out, and I want them out right now. And then, in your discipline plans that, step one, you call a parent, step two, they go to the counselor, and, all that's going on. And when they come back, it's just the same old thing. It's the same old behavior, right back into that classroom. And then once they get sent to the assistant principal's office once, or they get sent to the principal's office twice, assistant principal's office twice, then they get suspended. That's right. You are out of my class. You know that. You know, that's how we operate. You know, that's how we operate. And teachers are very pleased with that because they call that getting the job done, getting it done, finding out and trusting in the assistant principal to know that they can bring about some change. But in restorative practices, I found that at the very beginning of restorative practices, that was some results that came in from the state of Texas that showed that we were sending our students from school to prison. It was called the school to prison pipeline. And many of you, if you haven't experienced it, you read about it, you've been tested over it in your graduate courses, the school to prison pipeline. So what we found through those studies is that the majority of the students who were getting suspended were students of color. The majority of the students that were getting sent to ISS were students of color. And we had to do something about it because we noticed that looking at the prison pipeline, we saw that the students were moving from being suspended, being sent to the alternative campus, being expelled from school. And once you're expelled, they don't want you back. They don't want you back. And then we had those students who were coming in from juvenile, and they got right back into the classroom, and you were having to deal with that as the teacher. It just was not working. So the restorative practices came in to address that school to prison pipeline. They came in to address that. And as the principal, if you are interested in restorative practices, you are going to have some courage to bring that transformation because people want immediate action. Well, let me tell you something about immediate action. They suspend them, they come back. They send them to ISS. Somebody has made a mistake, or the teacher and the student just don't get along in that particular class. This happened at second period. They get sent to ISS, so they miss that third period, their fourth period, fifth period, sixth period, seventh period, eighth period, whatever periods, they miss them all. So they have missed instruction in all of those classes. They may have been marked absent in some of those classes if the school doesn't have a system set up to be able to determine where those students are. So you got a double hit. You got a hit where the students are out of class, they're not getting instruction. Then you get another hit where the child is marked absent. So that means if they're marked absent, school district's not going to get paid for a child that doesn't have his butt in the seat in that classroom when that teacher does that attendance. So how do we deal with this? How do we have a safe school? How do we transform schools? How do we support students in the school? One of the ways is restorative practices. Restorative practices. Now you say, well, restorative practices, we have PBIS. Well, restorative practices is a process. It's a process. It is not evidence-based, which simply means that if you are using the PBIS program, you have some evidence that something changed, something happened. And in some of the restorative practices, you do have some evidence base. You have some evidence that children are not being suspended. You have some evidence that there's no longer an ISS on that campus. That's your evidence. So the purpose of the restorative practices is to build relationships between educators and students. So how do you build relationships between educators and students? You have to discuss the needs of the school. You have to know the needs of the school community. It is a way to resolve conflict and hold students accountable. It is a way to repair harm when you are moving with the discipline side of restorative practices and to establish a positive relationship. It is a way for you to develop processes. It is a way for you to develop processes. So you say, well, I've heard about restorative practices, and I've heard that it's nothing but a circle. You let the children just get away with whatever they need to do. As I said, principals, courage brings transformation. In order for you to bring the change to restorative practices, you have to have some courage. So that means that you need principals, assistant principals. You need to get the training on restorative practices. And you will find at the core of restorative practices, there are several types of practices that you use in the classroom from the time that child even enters the classroom. There is some type of process. You recognize that child. I remember before I even knew about restorative practices, I had to say something as I stood at that door, and that's a restorative practice, standing at that door. That was a way for me to say something nice or say something good to that student. That's establishing relationship. For example, if you see a young man who hadn't had a haircut in a while, and then he walks in through that door and he has a nice haircut, what do you say? Oh, that's a nice haircut. Or do you say good morning? Or do you say good afternoon? Or do you say your tablets are on your desk? You say something. That's establishing your relationships. And then once you get inside that classroom, what do you have to establish some type of relationship? Do you talk about something? Is there a topic that can be talked about? Is there a process that you can use in that classroom where you find out about each other? You say, I don't have time to do all of that. I have to do my attendance. I have to do my warm-ups. I don't have time for that. Well, listen, principals, if you don't make time for that, then you will not be able to teach whatever it is that you're trying to teach. You have to have some type of restorative practice. And within the classroom, you all have to come up with something that is not just a rule that you're not going to break. You're going to have to talk about how we're going to respect each other in the classroom. And it's not something that's going to come from you as the teacher. It's going to come from the students. How are we going to decide how we're going to respect each other in this classroom? Student to student. What students, how do you want each other, how do you want to be treated in this classroom? Do you want the person next to you not to be yelling at you? Do you want the teacher to slow down on the way he or she is teaching? What do you want? What do you want in that classroom? How are you treating student to student? How are you treating teacher to student, student to student? How are we going to address the teacher in this classroom? Are we going to say, hey, ma'am? Are we going to address the teacher, by her name, by his name? Are you going to yell out? I mean, something as simple as that. Something as simple as that will bring about the change in your building. Will your teachers like it? They will, once they all receive the training. And it has to be an entire school process. It cannot be one where some of the teachers say, I'm not doing that. And then others will say, well, I want to learn how to respect my students. I want my students to learn how to respect me. And the other thing too is, restorative practices will also help teachers respect each other. Because the teachers have their issues as well. So when we're talking about 7 powerful pillars to produce a high quality school, one of the pillars is discipline, school discipline. And one of the pillars that will change your school climate, change your school culture is restorative practices. We're going to have to eliminate that zero tolerance. That's out the window. We're going to have to eliminate that ISS. That's right. I said eliminate the ISS. come up with something that you can put in place of an ISS, and that is building relationships. Can you use the SEL? Yes, you can. Social emotional learning? Yes, you can. That is a form of building relationships. Can you use PBIS? Certainly. That is a form of building relationships. But we are not in the business of throwing students out of the classroom, throwing students out of the building, and then expecting some different results. The thing is that those same students that you are writing out every day, those same students that you are suspending home, the students that you are sending to the alternative campus, those students are coming back. And the teachers, you are going to be held accountable for those students. Now you say, now everything is going to fall on the teachers. No, it's not. When you use restorative practices, you have the entire school community working toward that. Not just one teacher having the responsibility for all the kids in the class. It is a group effort with restorative practices. So once you get your school moving in that direction, where you learn to respect each other, where you learn to have a relationship with the teacher, have a relationship with students, have discussions about how we solve conflict in the classroom, how we hold each other accountable in the classroom. And then that spills on out into the community. That is how you change your school. That is how you handle your student discipline. Will that take courage? Absolutely. Courage is the only thing, or one of the only things, that's going to bring transformation. You can't expect change to happen overnight. As one of my assistant principals, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar, once told me, the only people who like change are babies with a wet diaper. So that means that change is going to come gradually. You are going to get a lot of pushback on restorative practices. But once you learn how to respect each other, have students to respect you, have you to respect students, and have a process for getting that done, then you won't even have to worry about suspensions, unless you're dealing with bringing guns on campus, having drugs on campus, or fighting. That's easy enough. Okay, that's easy enough. And then we have the opportunity to understand that there are several types of restorative practices, and one of those practices will be able to deal with the gun and deal with the drugs and deal with the fighting. Of course, when it deals with drugs and with weapons, of course, we're going to have to get the police involved. But the fighting, we can deal with that when it's on campus. Did I have to deal with fighting on campus? Absolutely. Did I have to deal with guns? Absolutely. Did I have to deal with drugs? Oh, it. I did. But when it came to building relationships among students, that is something that every teacher had to do. Every teacher had to be there to greet the student. I know it, and that what you said about some students, well, I just don't like them. Well, guess what? They don't like you, but you don't like them because you don't know them. They don't know you, so they don't like you. Have you ever seen somebody from a distance who's a friend of a friend who had a bad experience with the person? And you say, I don't like them because my friend doesn't like them? You don't know them. How are you going to not like somebody and you don't know them? You get to know them by building relationships. And teachers, you get to build relationships through using restorative practices. Then in the classroom, as that unit, as that group, as that team, Then we learn how to respect each other, how to support each other, how to strengthen each other. We learn what we have in common through restorative practices. So as I go into schools, there are some teachers who either at the beginning of the class period, maybe they will do a restorative practice exercise where they just find out how each student is doing, and that will give you a pulse, teachers. That give you a pulse of how things are going on in that classroom. What can you expect before you even start your instruction? What can you look forward to? Some teachers I've seen, they will do something at the end of the classroom, at the end of the class period. And that makes a difference as well. And there are several structures within the restorative practices. And there are several types of restorative practice that's going to make such a big difference. I was in a school district a couple of weeks ago where I was one of the facilitators for their small groups. We learned about, greeting our students. That was part of the instruction. I taught the teachers on how to do what's called a treatment plan, how we're going to treat each other here. Teachers learned about, okay, we have a plan and what happens when you violate the plan. But we as a group have to come up with that before it even happens at the beginning of the school district. Beginning of the school year. We have to establish that. And then we also have to establish what's going to happen when we violate that. When you have that kind of thing, do you have to send students to the assistant principal's office? I don't think so. I just don't think so. We have a question here. And the question says, let me see if I can get it up here. Thank you for saying that because there are more students being sent to ISS than they had in some classes. Ooh, that's powerful. That's powerful. And another question is, do you think that the teacher dress code plays a role in the behavior of students? Well, I think that the dress code has nothing to do with building relationships. Restorative practices is about relationships. Is what I wear, externally, does that, impact my relationship with students? As the teacher in the classroom, as the leader in the classroom, principals, of course, you need to have a dress code. You need to establish that with your students. I think that the school and the school district have policies that they have to follow. And and in each district, they're autonomous. They can decide, what they want the teacher dress code to be. And as long as that is in play, then the teacher has to follow whatever the dress code is in the building. However, when you are dealing with students, of course, you're going to have the common sense to have, a neat dress code, a neat appearance, because you are representing being represented as the adult in the classroom. And then you start to deal with behavior. Then you start to deal with making sure you have a safe environment. Then you start dealing with healthy relationships between the educator and the student. I hope that answers your question. Good question. Good question. So somebody else said, this is powerful. Yes, it is. It is powerful. And, I didn't understand how powerful this was when I was assigned to that low performing campus. I just knew that I had to bring about a change. I just knew that I had to bring the attendance rate up. I just knew that the students had to learn. I just knew that they couldn't learn when they're sitting inside ISS. They couldn't learn if they're suspended home. And we had to do something about it. And we had to do something about it. And once I found out about restorative practices, a lot of you may know it as restorative justice. That's how it came about as restorative justice, because it was something that was impact. It was the school to prison pipeline, and we saw that there was injustice there, and that injustice was taking place within our schools. And of course, it starts right within that classroom. And if you have a teacher who has no relationship with the students, there's going to be some discipline issues. Now, some people, may say, well, I don't like the teacher, but, I learned a lot from the teacher. I don't have to have a relationship with the teacher. And that works with certain types of mindsets. That works with certain types of mindsets. That does not work with all types of mindsets. Some of you, will say, I went into, Mrs. So-and-so's class. I didn't like Mrs. So-and-so, but, I learned a lot in that class, and I didn't have a relationship in that class. Sometimes that works. It's just like with corporal punishment. Corporal punishment worked on me. Just give me 2 or 3 licks and I'm done. You don't have to ever worry about me doing that again. But did it work on my brother? No. You could take that belt off and you could do corporal punishment as much as it was. When that lick, when that wears off, he's back to the same old thing. That's why restorative practices is so powerful. And that's why if you are going to have a high quality school discipline is one of the 7 most powerful pillars to produce a high quality school. So go to barbaraypogue.com if you want more information. And next time we are going to be again talking about the 7 pillars to produce a high quality school. And we'll be looking at restorative practices, and we're going to be discussing the different types of restorative practices, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about restorative practice and restorative justice. And it's hard to wrap your arms around. But once you understand fully how to have restorative practices working on your campus, and principal, again, you have to have courage to bring about this kind of transformation. You have to have courage to bring about this type of transformation. And once you find that you are having student discipline under control, then you will find out that all the good things that are spilling from the classroom to the hallways, those things will spill out into the community. And then you're going to have people standing at your door wanting their child to come to your school because you are practicing restorative issues. You have restorative practices, and it's manifesting itself as a place where people are happy, where people respect each other, where people have healthy relationships. And that's how it's done. That's how it's done. When you transform schools into hallelujah success stories. We'll see you next week, where we'll be discussing student discipline, 7 most powerful pillars to produce a high quality school.